Welcome, everybody, to Next Gen Leadership Live. I'm your host, Jimmy Ryan, and today we welcome Sasha Stair and Gino Ferrante. What's up, guys? Say
What's
hello.
happening?
Happy
What's
Tuesday.
up? All right, so we're going to talk about this. Where do you get your dopamine from? I think this is a great topic. I like because I'm just looking at it like myself. Like, okay, well, what do I really enjoy doing? Like in my job, I like making phone calls and just like doing calls and calls and calls and calls and calls and just like adding up a list. I'm kind of a freak with that, though. So like I don't think everybody's like that, but I think that we can put this in a lot of different realms for leadership. Gino, where do you get your dopamine from?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. What you just talked about is, kind of old school dopamine, right? Is a reward system. If you do this, then you'll get that. I mean, that's how we used to program. That's how our parents programmed us. And they also said, if you do this, then you get the belt, which doesn't happen anymore. But there was also negative reinforcement as well, right? It wasn't all positive reinforcement. And I think dopamine, and I used dopamine the other day because we were joking, but really it comes down to dopamine, serotonin, like all these oxytocin, all these hormones that we have is really what drives our mood. I'd like to say that my mood is driven because I meditate. No, it's not. I'd like to say that it's because I had 3 cups of coffee this morning. It's not. That helps. Maybe it changes things in your hormonal system. But ultimately, these things are really what dominates our feelings. And there's so many things that influence it throughout our lives. And one thing as a leader that's really difficult, probably the most difficult thing as a leader, is when you're walking through a physical office and everybody in that office is experiencing a different kind of emotion. You walk into the first guy's office, he's having a great day, gives you a high five, right? You walk into the second person's office, they're kind of down in the dumps because they just lost a deal yesterday. Walk into the third person's office and their family member's sick. Walk into the fourth person's office and something great happened. Their kid graduated from college. So it's not any one of these emotions that's good or bad. It's the change in emotions that cause the problem. And so we're always chasing something to make us feel better. And I think what's changed, and Sasha, you could chime in, what's changed over the last decade is how often we're looking for that reinforcement. I mean, we need it now. It feels like we need it, like a drug addict, like every few minutes. Hence social media.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line, we all want to be loved, accepted, seen, heard, right? And so anything that helps reinforce that is something we're looking for. And unfortunately, I think to your point, things like social media have potentially made that more of a dependency than less. I personally have an addiction to chaos and went through Al-Anon, 12-step program for a loved one of an alcoholic, because I was raised by an alcoholic father and had to learn very quickly to pay attention to in life. I like chaos because I know how to manage it and I'm comfortable with it. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, depending on how I manage that, right? So it's a good thing because you can throw me into a fire and I'll be the one that's like, we got this. I'll get everyone calm. We'll put a plan in place. We start moving. We get things done. But it's a bad thing when I start to find myself attracting more of it into my life than is necessary just to make myself feel more accepted, right? So it's almost like we have to pay attention to our habits and the things that kind of pop up in our lives that we go like, where are those patterns, right? Where do we see ourselves like constantly searching for, looking for that acceptance, that affirmation that we're good enough, that we're worthy? Because that's typically both where we're tapping into the stuff that helps us feel better, but also potentially areas where we might be falling down the trap of things that are not necessarily a healthy source of dopamine.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you just described is I could think of a couple of employees, former companies that I worked at, where they would like come in as the hero at the end, and they would like do this amazing like bend over backwards trick and fund just at the last minute so that nobody gets upset, right? And they wanted praise for that. And myself as a leader, I had to be the honest person with them and say, I will not give you praise for something you should have avoided in the first place. That's being a good leader, is telling them the truth and saying, I'm not going to applaud you because you should have prevented this. right? So a lot of what you're describing too is it's reactive. Right? We're very reactive, and so as we become, and we've talked a lot about discipline. As you become more disciplined, chaos actually becomes super distracting, and you're like, I don't want that, And I'm with you though. I used to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
Now I focus all my time on trying to prevent fires. I'm like Smokey the Bear.
I think being aware of those triggers and how you respond is the part that matters as a leader, because we all have something, right? But if we know it and we can see it creeping back in, we can not only correct ourselves, which leadership starts within, as you know, I talk about that all the time, starts with you. But then also, if you're going to guide other people through their own triggers, you have to be able to not only understand yours, but understand theirs and the signs of when they are going down that path and be like, hey, in a loving way, let's pull you aside. Let's have that conversation, right? Not a healthy source of dopamine. How do we fix that?
Yeah, guys. Wow. I think that it really is a discipline type of a thing, and where you're getting your dopamine from, it might be from like running around fighting fires. But I tell you what, I get a lot of dopamine out of preventing them too. Like I think it's a weird kind of like maturity having the dopamine from the premature firefight than the 11th hour one. And I think that's really what it is. It's maturity in choosing what your dopamine source is.
Sure.
Well, if you think about it, what you're really talking about is that you were getting your dopamine after you were getting your cortisol. Because if you like fight or flight,
right?
If you want to be in fight or flight, you're going to get cortisol, right? And so then you've got all this cortisol, which is your stress hormone, okay, creating all kinds of havoc in your body. And then you flush it with dopamine because you did something right and you think you fixed it all and it's all great. It's like, who needs all that shit? Like, let's just avoid all those problems and try to have a little more homeostasis. Like,
you joked about meditation, like not being your source, but I will say this, like my morning practice, as well as time in nature, really does help me ground enough that I can take on a day more aware and like get ahead of not starting fires to fight them. Right. So I think different people, right, it's going to be a different scenario that works for them. But that actually does make a huge difference for me. If I don't ground in the morning, I am immediately operating from an ungrounded, uncentered space. And it is highly more likely that I'm going to be tapping into dopamine to solve for cortisol versus looking for dopamine for the positive reasons.
So my morning routine has become like a little religion to me. It's important. I moved all my meetings except for 2 meetings a week. I don't have any meetings before 9 a.m. It doesn't mean I don't work before 9 a.m. Start sending emails at 5 a.m. But I don't have any meetings before 9 a.m. because I want to get into a state of mind where I've taken some of the chaos off my plate. I've solved some of the morning problems. I'm in a good state of mind and I feel good when I'm interacting with other humans. Right. And so morning routine does have a very big and important place in this. And for me, it gives me a sense of calm before I start my day.
Exactly.
Because my job is to react to chaos. I mean, the reality is we are in the mortgage business. I have a bunch of employees and chaos is there. It's everywhere. But we try to avoid it on every desk. And if everybody's trained to avoid it on every desk and we have a no drama policy, like it's pretty easy to be like, this, if anything ever brews, you're like, this sounds like drama. Does it sound like drama to you? Then we don't have any of that. How do we fix the problem? Like, I don't want noise. I don't want drama. I don't want emotions. What's the problem? What are the 3 potential solutions? I'll make an executive decision on which one we're going to go with. And if it's good, it's good. And if it's bad, it's bad, right? Like the reality is that's what leaders do, is make decisions. Not all of them are right. God knows I make mistakes.
Well, in going back to dopamine, what about like working out too? You know what I mean? Like that's a huge source of dopamine, and it doesn't just have to be work stuff. I mean, like, are your dopamine addictions are they healthy? Because I mean that's what you want. You want to do it, but is it like is it scrolling through social media? Is it binge watching Netflix, or is it working out?
Is it drinking? Is it partying? Is it whatever?
Right.
I mean, there's definitely some negative paths you can go down as it relates to trying to satisfy these needs. You have to. You're human. You're going to have to satisfy them somehow. So you just have to try to choose good things to offset them. And it's kind of like that. It's kind of like the habit stacks, right? Like you get the same feeling from good things and bad things, or similar enough. So try to pick the good ones.
Well,
Right.
it's a balance, and again, to your point, we're human. We're gonna have chaos. We're gonna have firefighting moments. We're gonna have drama. We're gonna have negative stuff that comes up. You can't avoid it all. And yes, you might have great practices in place to manage it when it happens. But the other side of it is, as a leader, as a manager, we often have to like take it on for a minute and then manage it. And sometimes we don't always release that physiological response of having taken it on. And working out is a place where you can let go of that stress. And again, you can't tend to other people's cups if you don't fill up your own first. So like start with yourself, get yourself in a healthy place. And that's not just like getting yourself hooked up on dopamine in a positive way. It's also releasing the cortisol in a healthy way.
Yeah, I'll tell you, days that I don't work out are worse than days that I do. Every time. 100% of the time.
It really is true. It's a weird truth. It just doesn't feel right. It's just like you're off.
And you don't know what it is. It's like 3:00 and you're kind of tired and you're like, I don't just not feeling it today. And then you're like, oh, I didn't go to work out. It just, I think it sets, as we started the call, like with all these hormones, I think it sets them into a good space by working out. Like you said, we burn off the bad stuff and bring on the good stuff, and it puts us in a good direction for the day. Not to mention feeling so accomplished, right? Like I go at 5:00 in the morning, I'm driving home at 6:30. At 6:30 in the morning, I've already crushed my day. Like I've already done more than most will do by 9. So waking up early is a huge thing. And I was just listening to Andy Elliott's podcast, and it's called The One Percenters. And the first thing they were talking about was getting up early and working out early. It's one of those things when you look at the common habits of successful people, waking up early and working out early is one of those things that it doesn't guarantee success, but it sure does set you on the right foot.
It does. Make your bed. That's another one. It's so silly and so simple and so easy. But man, does that not only create that like habitual behavior that you can build off of, but it's like an accomplishment. What a silly accomplishment that can actually be so profoundly impactful.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, the saying "early bird gets the worm" came from somewhere.
Yeah.
It wasn't a mistake. It's true.
Yeah.
So, gosh, I just lost train of thought. Okay, but I have a different thing I want to talk about anyway. So, how do you encourage people as a leader to choose the right healthy, habits, really, and really to choose like, hey, man, chase this dopamine. It's better dopamine. How are you as a leader doing that?
You want to attack that, Sasha, or you want me to go?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, especially when I'm coaching folks, I am focused on helping them figure it out for themselves first. So it's like asking the right questions so that they can determine what fits for me, what makes sense for me, what actually gives me joy, and like help them dig deeper into those questions so that they understand, is it really giving me sustaining joy? And is it a good, positive, healthy joy? Or is this a type of joy that I like my chaos, where I'm addicted to it because it's what I've always known and where I'm comfortable? And then maybe it's coaching them through realizing that and understanding that so that they can go, oh, it's not actually, solving problems that makes me happy. It's, being around my family at the dinner table, having meaningful conversation, right? Or whatever. I just made up an example, right? But I think having those situational leadership abilities where you can walk in person to person and coach them through that process so that they can figure out what's best for them. That's usually my method to the madness.
How about hobbies? Mm-hmm. How about asking people about their hobbies? What do you like to do? And they'll be like, what does this have to do with this? Just, they have to go to their happy place for a minute, right? So I wore this shirt.
The Grill Father.
The Grill Father.
Right? I mean,
I love it.
That's my happy place too, right? So I go to the gym, I get dopamine,
is.
Right? I have my morning routine, I get dopamine. When I'm cooking, I get dopamine. It's what I like to do, right? When I'm messing with these fish back here that drive me crazy, right? It's just like, it's complicated, but it gives me peace. And all of that is time away from email. So for me, if my chaos is in my email, everything I do that's outside of that gives me peace. Right. And so I like I think it's called the Pomodoro method, where you work for 30 minutes of focus and 10 minutes off. And you could change those times. It doesn't have to be 30 and 10. Maybe for you, it's 20 and 5. Maybe for you, it's an hour. And I wish I can't get to an hour of focus usually. But 30 minutes of focus, 5 or 10 minutes of break, mess with something you like, go water your plants, go do something that you enjoy, get that little dopamine hit and say, okay, what am I going to tackle next? And then go tackle the next thing and go tackle the next thing and get healthy rewards from managing the chaos. If you're in a leadership position, I don't even like the word chaos. Like, we have challenges to solve, puzzles, right? And so let's approach those puzzles in a positive way and solve them. And then once they're solved, by the way, this happens a lot when you're a leader, is you try to figure out why it happened at the same time as you're trying to fix it. That's a huge mistake. I've gotten so much better results from fixing the problem first. And when they try to figure out the excuses and the why it happened, is listen, none of that's important right now. Let's solve the problem. That's going to take us to a path where we need to go anyway. We'll figure out how it happened later. And so let's solve the problem, get past the challenge. Anxiety comes down for everybody, right? And then you can have an adult conversation when people are not in fight or flight. You can have an adult conversation and say, okay, listen, that was totally avoidable. Clearly, you're not using your checklist. Have you used your checklist lately? No. Okay, listen, I know you've been doing this for 30 years, but when you use a checklist, these things don't happen. That's what they're for. All this isn't because you're not smart enough or you don't have the skill. This is just because you forgot.
Or time box event. Like, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. But sometimes people are so emotionally triggered that they're not going to be able to get out of that fight or flight response without just releasing the valve. And so it's like, okay, fine, you get 2 minutes, right? Lay it on me, go ahead and vent. But when those 2 minutes are up, no complaining, no excuses, no whining, we're going to move to solution. And honestly, there's always going to be bigger things in life that are going to require more than 2 minutes. So this is not a one size fits all. But generally speaking, when somebody's charged up about something at work, 2 or 3 minutes of venting is enough to just like let it out of your system. And then now let's get to what you talked about, right? Let's talk about the solutions. Let's move forward and like leave the drama in the past, right? Yeah. Let someone have a 5-year-old temper tantrum for a hot minute.
Yeah, I always relate it to fishing because I love fishing. I wish I did more of it. It's one of those things on my list of things I want in my life is more time to go fishing. But it's the same thing. If you pull too hard, the line will snap, right? So you have to you got to let that fish run when it's angry, and you have to know when the time is that you can reel it in and when you can't. Yeah. And so I think it was Hal Elrod that said that the successful people are measured by how long their pity party is. You know, and bad things happen. And so when you identify that bad things happen, say, okay, I'm going to be pretty bummed about this, but I'm going to give myself 5 minutes. And then when this pity party's over, I'm going to go back to work. Yeah. So I totally believe in that 2 to 5 minutes. Also, I believe in the fake email. Type the email out, angry as all hell.
Just don't put anyone in that 2 column.
Don't put anybody in the 2 column, and then email it to yourself and then read it. Because for whatever reason, and I don't understand this, it's not the same when you read it before you send it than when you read it after you send it. So send it to yourself, read it again, and be like, oh, that's a bit rough. Check the tone. Oh, it's not, my spaces are in the wrong place. I typed everything wrong. And then clean up. By the second time you write an email, things are so different. You write it better. Your tone is better. You're less angry. But go ahead and have that rant in that first email. And I'm personally experiencing this today. So yesterday I had a verbal rant with somebody for just about a minute on the phone, just expressing something I didn't like. And then today I typed the email and I haven't sent it to anybody, but I feel better about it because I typed the email. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to send the email. It might not even matter. But I'm over it because I did those 2 exercises. So I don't know what hormone that gives you when you solve a problem like that. I don't know if it's dopamine or not. But it definitely reduces anger.
So I think one last thing I want to, I guess, like do positive spins on dopamine is, and this is what I was thinking about before, is that you have to sometimes make your job into a game. And you were mentioning checklists before, Gino. I mean, it's fun to check a box. I don't know. I want to check that box. And like for me, I track all my calls. I have it like I do check boxes. Like I'm addicted to it. But like I make a game out of it and I track all my numbers, and it makes it so that I get that dopamine hit from doing something that is going to advance my career, get me more money. You can do the same thing with real estate agent cold calls. You can like, hey, I'm getting to 40, you know, I'm going to call my 40 list or whatever. I'd recommend making more calls than that, but regardless, you can make a game out of this too. And I think that that's something that it's just a little hack to your job where you can make it fun and give yourself dopamine.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's just completing projects is a rush. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You complete a project, you feel good about yourself. You're patting yourself on the back for at least 20 minutes. You're like, I can't believe I did that. Good job. You know, so if you could do that often and stay in that zone, right? When people say they're in flow state really means accomplishing things. That's all it means. Who the hell came up with flow state? It's just getting shit done.
Hey, now,
this isn't the Get It Done podcast.
Great talk on that Momentum Builder this year.
Huh?
I said I did a great talk on being in the state of flow at Momentum Builder this year.
Yeah.
I do think, though, you know, the checking the box for the sake of checking the box isn't great. And so I think it's helpful to put small, simple things on that list, too, because there are going to be bigger ones and you're maybe not going to be able to check it off as fast as you want to. But again, that gamification that you're talking about, Jimmy, where we get a high from being able to feel good about checking a box, then put some smaller, simple things on there. So that way you are checking a box every day. So you get that little kick, but you're not necessarily pushing yourself too fast to check a box that should maybe take a little bit more time.
Yeah. And then also when you're checking those boxes, make sure that not all of them are work related, right? Like the morning routine boxes are just as important. The evening routine boxes are just as important. Like I'm like 3 days in a row, I missed my greens because I have them at 4 o'clock and I wasn't home. So it's like, well, now I missed it. Like then I was in my 6 o'clock routine. So, I mean, that's to the point. Like I've got all these bunch of little things that I've said along the way. I do this in the morning. I do this in before I go to the office. I do this when I get back. Like I've got all this like super hyper structured routine. And when you miss one thing, you're like, now what? You know, it's hard to sometimes get back on that wagon.
It is hard.
You missed 2 days of the gym. The third day, you're like, I don't know if I want to go.
I know not everyone's an animal person, but man, the conferences that bring Adopt a Puppy to the conference itself, and there's like 6 puppies running around a little playpen, and you can just like take a break and like go over and pick up a puppy, is like the greatest idea ever. So like I get not everyone's an animal person, but if
Sonia has been trying to tell me we need to do this for Momentum Builder. We need to have a puppy pen, and I'm like, what does that have to do with mortgage or with success or with anything?
Puts you in a good mood, and guess what you do when you're in a good mood? You know, you buy shit. That's what you do when you're in a good mood.
It would be
why
adorable.
they have them at conferences, and you're also doing a good thing because these are dogs that are not just getting like playtime, but we're putting them up for adoption. We're finding them a good home. I'm telling you.
All right, learn more about it on the Inside Job.
Thanks for the pitch there.
Plug.
Appreciate it. The plug. Thank you.
All right, we are.
Guys, look, at the end of the day, so to summarize, there are good places to get dopamine. There are bad places to get dopamine. Identify where you're at with your own life, and try to just pick better sources.
Yeah.
You know, and if you can use one of the hacks, like a checklist, like we talked about, I think it's like building a business plan. Even just building the checklist is an accomplishment.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. All right, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I actually want to thank Sasha Stare over there, the author of The Inside Job. I have it right next to me, so I wanted to just.
Neither of you are going to read it until I put it on Audible, so don't even start with me.
You got to put it in my ears. Everybody learns.
I thought I just grabbed it. All right, this is Ben.
Well done.
Next Gen Leadership. I also want to thank Gino over there too. I forgot to say thank you for joining us, but we appreciate it, and we will see you guys next time.